Hello, BookTube. As I mentioned in an earlier video, I was called for jury duty at the Boston Superior Courthouse, and I went duly, and I was not chosen for jury duty. So, that was the outcome I was hoping for. I was hoping that I would not get chosen, so that I wouldn't have my whole existence tied down to a courtroom trial for the next week or 2 weeks or whatever. And the procedure is that you go there, you show up at the ungodly hour of 8 in the morning, you get all processed and ready, and then at 9 the whole show starts. At 9 the courthouse comes alive and everybody starts doing their business. And you mostly sit and wait. You sit and wait until you're called to various courtrooms to be vetted by various judges and various prosecutors and whatnot. So I knew ahead of time that I was going to have, at the very best case scenario, I was going to have a few hours of leisure time, of enforced leisure time, where I was just sitting around with nothing to do. And I don't, in circumstances like that, where security is an issue and where there are all sorts of high-powered X-ray devices, both the gates and the handheld wands, I also don't like to bring electronics anywhere near those things, because I'm not using my electronics to play World of Warcraft. I need what's on there, and I need it to be pristine. So I left my phone, and I left my laptop, and I left and all that stuff at home. And I figured, you spent 50 years writing book reviews without a computer. You spent 30 years writing book reviews without even knowing what a computer was. So you spent 20 years writing reviews before there were computers. So I think you can probably manage. So I brought a book and a notebook, and just sat there happily writing a review. But then I got called. We all got called, and my services were not needed. So I was, instead of being mired there all day long or all week long, I was free at noon, and decided, even though it's a gray and rainy day here in Boston, I decided I would treat myself a little bit, just a few minutes before I head home to my little schnauzer. So I went to the Brattle bookshop. Went just down Boston Common to the Brattle bookshop. The reason why it was sort of a furtive last-minute thing, the reason why I don't sound exactly the same as I usually do when I talk about going to the Brattle, is because the Brattle has an outdoor sale lot right next to the building. It's huge, and it's full of $1, $3, and $5 sale books that are just, it's a cornucopia for a book lover, because it's not junk. Unlike some other used bookstores that put their junk outside on a bargain table and leave it out in all weathers so that you get blotched, moldy, slug-ridden things. The books outside are not junk. They're wonderful. And I knew that on a day that was intermittent downpours, the outside carts would be tarped over, and I wouldn't really have access to them, which isn't quite the hardship that it sounds, because the books inside the Brattle bookshop, the books that are for sale on the shelves set up by a subject and whatnot, the books outside aren't organized at all, but the books inside the shop are extremely reasonably priced. It's not like you're hitting, a hardship if you go in there. But I wanted to see everybody anyway. I wanted to talk to everybody anyway. So I made a trip to the Brattle, and I actually found a couple of books, and both of them are biographies. And I'm very happy with them. I only found 2 books, but those of you who've been watching my struggles with my ever-expanding library know that what I would like to do is retain the pure childlike joy of places like the Brattle bookshop, only divorce it from the expression of that joy being an armload of books. I don't need an armload of books. I can be selective and still have that joy. So today I got 2 biographies that I have read. I've read both of them, and one of them is new, one of them is not quite so new, and both of them are fantastic, absolutely fantastic, probably the best biographies of their subjects, and I found them both today, and I wanted to show them to you. The first one is this. It's a relatively new book. It's A Revolution in Color by Jane Kamensky. This is the world of John Singleton Copley, an American-born painter of just incredible talent, just amazing talent. He was born on Long Wharf in Boston. He was born and raised in a world that knew nothing of a professional painter. It was a classic story of just talent winning out. He was just something in the way he saw the world, something in the way that he saw color. Kamensky's really good about that. Also composition, something in that, and also an incredible, hungry autodidact ability to learn, to pick up new skills, plus hand-eye coordination. All of that combined to make him just this painter who couldn't stop. And once he had formal training, his client list was just around the block. And I have a very old biography of him, like 110, 150 years old. But this thing is, there isn't any breaking news on John Singleton Copley. Kamensky does some new research, but the main joy of this book is just her wonderful writing, her wonderful, steeply intelligent insights into him and his world. And the reason that his world is so important is a bit of a tragedy. Is because he was born on the eve of the American Revolution and viewed himself as British. And so when the revolution broke out, he left. He was one of the many, many, many thousands and thousands of loyalists who did not agree with Samuel Adams and James Otis and Joseph Warren and John Adams. They did not agree that America had the right or should secede from Britain. Well, that's a horrible position to be in. People, when we think about the American Revolution, we don't often think about the loyalists, the huge numbers of Americans, the majority, who didn't agree with this fundamental political change. And Copley and his family were among that number, so they emigrated. So he spent the rest of his life in Britain, and this is. I love my very old, very fusty Copley biography, but this is an improvement in every way. I don't know why I didn't have a copy. I think, if I remember correctly, the reason was that I got an advance copy. I got an ARC of this book, but I never got a finished copy. And I think I got rid of the ARC just assuming I would get a finished copy. And that, because I knew right away, I knew as soon as I read it, this was going to be a keeper, something I would want to keep. And then I didn't get a finished copy. So I think that's probably how it worked. But I was very happy to find this. It goes right up on the shelf, probably with a chunk of rereading first. And then this next one, I was looking at my biography section the other day. I moved a couple of bookcases around, little bookcases. And, no, get out of that box. What's the matter with you? You have a toy. There you go. When I was moving all these bookcases around, little bookcases, my boys don't allow me to move big bookcases without them, so I was moving little bookcases. It was perfectly within my weight range. And it caused me to re-examine my biographies. It increased the shelf space for the biographies, so I turned a cool, new assessing eye to the biographies and was staring at them, pulling out some doubles, pulling out deadweight from books that were published last year that I don't want to keep, that sort of thing. And while I was doing that, I had many realizations. There were quite a few. I realized one thing, for instance, I have almost no standalone biographies of Roman emperors, which I realize the documentary evidence is kind of poor on most of them, but nevertheless, there are standalone biographies of almost all of them. So anyway, one thing I noticed when I was looking through those biographies is that I didn't currently own a biography of Nathaniel Hawthorne, one of my favorite American writers. And I was just dumbfounded. I was trying to figure out how that could possibly happen, that I could ever end up in a place where I would have no Hawthorne biographies when there have been so many good ones. There have been probably 6 good ones. And at one point, I had all 6 of them. And then I realized, yes, that's the problem. That's the explanation. At one point, when you were in a mania to downsize your library, you looked into the biography section and saw 6 biographies of Hawthorne and thought, why do you even need one? Why on earth do you have 6? And when I saw that, I'm sure I overreacted and just got rid of them all. And I thought, well, no, you want a biography of Hawthorne. And then I realized, well, okay, you can't get just one. And when you're in that frame of mind, that's when you realize where your favorites lie. Because I thought, okay, well, if I could only get just one, what's the one that I hope I see next? And I found it. I found it. It's Philip McFarlane's Hawthorne and Concord, which is not a straightforward biography. It's more inventive than that. And not only rhetorically, he uses some writing styles in this book that take a little getting used to. This is an experiment a quiet experiment on levels that aren't obvious. So it could throw you off if you were reading it and weren't thinking of just the facts, ma'am. But in addition to that, it's small, and this author brings out the long-windedness in his biographers like crazy. Not always a bad thing. Salem Is My Dwelling Place is 3 times this size, and it's a really good biography of Hawthorne. But the main thing, the main inventiveness in this book is the format. The author traces Hawthorne's life through the 3 times that he lived in Concord. Once as an up-and-coming author, and then once very briefly when he returned to Concord, because he was a married man then. It was happy times. He had wonderful memories of Concord. But he was feverishly involved in hack work, which, any of you know, this author, it was antithetical to his personality to do hack work. But when he was at school, he was close friends, to put it mildly, with a young man named Franklin Pierce. And decades later, Franklin Pierce became president of the United States. But before he did that, he wanted Hawthorne to write a biography, a campaign biography of him. And there were rich pickings. That was how you got a very lucrative position in the administration, was to do that. So he did. Hawthorne dropped his legitimate literary endeavors and wrote a campaign biography of Franklin Pierce, and was rewarded with rich pickings, a rich posting that required him to leave the country. So the second trip to Concord, the second stay in Concord, was hectic and abbreviated. And then there was the third stay in Concord, where he returned as a world-lionized author. And in the book, you kind of expect, even if you know the facts, you're still hoping against hope that this third stay will be the one that does it. It will be the one where he gets the peace and quiet that he always craved from when he was an 18-year-old. But it was right on the eve of the Civil War, and there was no peace and quiet anywhere in the country. And the amazing thing about the book is that it drops you down in all 3 of these very different periods in the author's life and keeps the strands running through them. So it's amazingly done. And here it is. So I now have a Hawthorne biography, and I can sit contentedly with this until the others crop up. I think I want at least Salem Is My Dwelling Place. I think I want at least that. And then who knows what new biographies might come out. This is exactly the sort of thing that I always worried about. Because, here I am going to the Brattle and getting an old biography of Nathaniel Hawthorne, when for all I know, in 2020, there's going to be a 1,000-page new biography of Nathaniel Hawthorne that hasn't no advance warning posted. I'm just going to have to find it, and maybe I'll love it so much that I'll want it. But one way or another, I wanted to show you this. It's a very small Brattle haul, but I would like that to be the norm rather than the exception. So we have Hawthorne and Concord, and A Revolution in Color. 2 people who spent a lot of time in Boston. And the nice thing about a smaller Brattle size, about a controlled Brattle buy, is that I'm going to keep these books. And that's a nice feeling, to know that I'm just going to dip into them, savor them a bit, and then put them on the shelf where they belong, instead of, yeah, this looked kind of good, but it goes immediately on the resale pile. Something about that, when that happens too often, starts to feel very, very unsatisfying. So that was just a quick Brattle trip that I did today. I indulged myself for just a bit, and then I hurried back to my little Fraulein, and she was happy to see me. And now jury duty is over for another 3 years. When 3 years have passed exactly, I will get another notification. They never pass me up. I hear stories from people in Boston who, I got summoned for jury duty like 10 years ago. I haven't heard from them since. Yeah, well, one way or another, that's not me. I'm in some sort of database, because the minute my exemption period, you're exempt for 3 years if you serve. And if you show up and waste the morning, you have served. So the minute that exemption period is over in 3 years, I will get another notice. And I will be going through all this again. Every once in a while, the worst happens and I actually get impaneled on the jury, but this is the outcome I much prefer. So there you go. There's my jury duty drama story for you. So I'll wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.